So, and just to sort of let you know the premise here, this story begins in heaven's archives.
Oh, there you go.
That's it. Oh, bless my soul, bless my soul. Where in heaven's name could that have disappeared to? This is just as impossible. It's gotta be here. It's gotta. Oh, this is bad, really bad. If Gabriel finds out, he's gonna kill me. Oh, wait, he really can't do that, can he? But he can demote me from angel second class to angel third class, couldn't he? Well, I could certainly kiss those angel wings goodbye. Oh dear, what am I to do? Yes, what is it?
Excuse me, is anyone here? I'm looking for the archives.
The archives? No, I haven't heard that one since Pontius was a pilot. The truth is, lady, there isn't just an archives. There are over 11 billion different archives here in heaven. We're covering all of human history on earth, you know. I mean, all the good works done in our God's name. You're going to have to be a little more specific. An era, a region, something to narrow it down.
Well, okay, I see. Well, my apologies. It's just, you see, I got this note to report to, wait a minute. Who in heaven's name am I talking to? And perhaps more to the point, where are you? Where exactly? There's nothing here but stacks and folders and aisles of boxes as far as the eye can see, and I do mean as far as the eye can see, and I have to say, for an archives, they don't look overly organized. Are you back there somewhere, aren't you?
Wait a minute, lady, sorry. I just gotta move a couple dozen of these boxes about a bishop that just came in. Okay, no, wait a minute. What in heaven's name? How did these get here? Well, never mind, I'll just deal with those later. Anyway, where was I?
Excuse me?
Oh, the lady, that's right. Be right there, just one more box, and there we are. Now, who do I have the pleasure of meeting?
Mrs. Wilma Hempel, and you are?
Oh, nice to meet you. I'm Charlie Oddbody, Angel Second Class, for the moment. I am Junior Assistant to the Archivist for Section 1550, Subsection 65, Region 3245, Subjects 234M through 235U.
Wow, that sounds very important.
Does it? No, it's really not. Actually, I'm more of an intern, and I don't think I'm going to be that for much longer. Not after Gabriel finds out the file that I've misplaced. It is not going to be great.
Misplaced file? Oh, my. Well, Charlie, I don't mean to be unkind, but this place is unbelievable. You've got stacks to 4 corners of heaven, and it all appears to be a jumble. How in heaven could you find anything so that you could then lose it?
Now, wait a minute, Miss Campbell. Maybe to the untrained eye, this looks like disorganized shambles. But let me assure you, I can put my fingers on any piece of paper that the angels upstairs ask for.
Okay, so have all these boxes been assigned an accession number?
Not exactly.
Well, at least you must have an inventory somewhere, you know, a list of the series in your collection.
I'm working on it.
And what kind of records management system do you use?
You said you had a note?
Yes, it says I'm to report to the archives, and here I am.
My hand. Wait a minute. We have tens of thousands of Wilma Hamples in our file, so to be sure. Your middle name was?
Ilif, I-L-I-F.
Well, that narrows it down quite a bit, doesn't it? And where were you born?
Mars, Iowa, January of 1908, if you must know.
That's good. And your father was Frederick Henry Thiel, a pastor in the German Methodist Episcopal Church?
That's right.
Well, bless my soul. This is a miracle. You are exactly the person I need to talk to. I'm sure this must be Gabriel's doing. You see, it is your file that I have misplaced.
My file?
Yes, the story of your life. You know, all of your efforts over the years doing God's good work.
My good works? They're lost?
Well, sort of. But now it's found, don't you see?
Wait a minute. You've lost all my good works, my whole life efforts, every record of what I did to further the coming of God's kingdom on earth, All of that work like it never happened?
Now, don't be upset. Actually, I never said it had all gone missing. Technically, I only seemed to have misplaced the files from 1955 to 1965. And especially the part about the founding of Northcott neighborhood house.
What?
I know, it sounds bad. But you're here, you see it. Gabriel's bidding, I am sure. And together, we can recreate the file. Won't that be fun?
I guess. And how does that work exactly?
Easy as pie. You see, I have this heavenly harp thingy. And when I strum it, it can take us together back to any point in your life. And then we record it, and we put it in your file.
The whole 10 years, every second?
Ooh, is that what you want?
I think not.
Well, we won't. We can just, hit the high points. Especially how we work with where did I put those notes? Oh yeah, the Women's Society of Christian Service, whatever that is. And the creation of the Northcott neighborhood house. Does that ring a bell?
Well, of course it rings a bell. It was my life, I guess I could do that, so where do we start?
Well, that's up to you. Where would you like to start?
Where to start? Well, Mr. Oddbody. Charlie. Okay, Charlie. To understand the creation of Northcott Neighborhood House, you must understand race relations in Milwaukee in 1955. So that's where I'd like to start.
Yeah. Any place in particular? Wait a minute. Before you say anything, let me find my heavenly harp thingy. Now, where did I put that last? Ha-ha! Got it. Okay, go ahead, Miss Campbell.
Wilma, please.
All right. Okay, Wilma, where should we go?
Well, how about the First Methodist Church in Milwaukee, February 22nd, 1956. Can you do that?
You betcha. Just let me dial it in on my harp thingy. The archive still goes analog, And there we go. Now, what do we have here? Goodness, that's quite the sanctuary. And look at all those people. What's this all about, Wilma?
Well, Charlie, what we have here is a conference, a gathering of interested people to consider the topic Methodism and the Inclusive Church. Those are all Methodists, mostly Wisconsin Methodists, meeting to examine the state of race relations in Milwaukee and how the Methodist Church could respond.
And you were involved how?
Well, for starters, I was on the steering committee for the conference, providing housing was part of my responsibility.
I see. And this was part of your women's work? What did you call it? The Women's Society for Christian something? Whatever it was?
Service, Charlie. Service. Let's just say WSCS, okay? And yes, it was my women's work, at least indirectly. The conference was sponsored by Bishop Clare of the Lexington Conference, Bishop Northcott of the Wisconsin Conference, and the General Board of Social and Economic Relations. But WSCS members like me certainly made up a significant part of the lay participants. And at the time, I was the Milwaukee District Secretary of the Christian Social Relations Department for the WSCS, and I was on the Mayor's Urban Redevelopment Committee. So, you see, I had an interest in the topic. The workshops were inspiring and challenging. I certainly had my eyes and heart opened, and I learned a lot.
Okay, I got that for the record. Now surveying the crowd here, it looks to be well over 100 souls. What stands out is the number of African Americans, maybe half. Looking at my notes from the archives. Oh yeah, integrated gatherings in Milwaukee in 1956. That's not typical, to say the least.
No, sadly, you're right, Charlie, and that's one of the problems that this conference is trying to address, inclusiveness, especially in our Milwaukee churches.
Inclusiveness? Oh, good grief, a problem as old as creation. And how did this group plan to do that?
Well, Charlie, let's start with some facts. In Milwaukee, beginning in the 1940s, African Americans had been migrating from the southern states, primarily Mississippi and Alabama. Life was hard and dangerous there, and they came looking for a better life in Milwaukee, just as the immigrant groups before them had done. Not just the Germans, but the Irish, Polish, the Greeks, the Italians, others. Charlie, between 1940 and 1950, the African American population more than doubled in Milwaukee. And between 1950 and 1960, as it would turn out, it would triple. Still, in 1956, African Americans were only a little over 8% of the Milwaukee population.
So I'm guessing there were some problems.
No, Charlie, there are always problems. Adjustments. When a new wave of immigrants arrives, immigrants often face discrimination, and Milwaukee was a city that was largely populated by immigrants who also had to adjust. African Americans, which is the latest wave.
So you might think that the previous immigrants would be sympathetic to the challenges of the immigrant groups that followed them, reach out to give them a hand.
You might, but you'd be wrong. This tendency to feel threatened by the stranger, unfortunately, it was now complicated by the crippling poison of racism.
I see. So what's a Christian to do?
Well, that was exactly the issue our conference was trying to address. You see, like all newly arriving immigrants, African Americans could find housing only in the oldest, most dilapidated parts of the city. They were confined to an area called the inner core, and because of housing covenants and gentlemen's agreements, their ability to move anywhere else in Milwaukee was almost non-existent. The population pressure was slowly pushing them out of the core and into the surrounding areas served by our Methodist churches. And the question became, how do we respond?
Okay, after 2 days of meeting, what did your group come up with?
Well, we came up with a 75-page report. We recommended techniques to promote inclusive churches and open door policies. We also recommended that these techniques be implemented in the 3 Methodist churches in Milwaukee that were the most in the midst of racial tension.
And which churches were those?
Let's see. First, there was a St. James Methodist Church. It was actually located in that inner city core, and its congregation was nearly entirely African American. That was one of the most frustrating parts, racial segregation in the Methodist Church itself. For St. James Methodist Church was part of the Lexington Conference, a racially segregated conference, not the Wisconsin Conference of the Methodist Church.
That's ironic, isn't it? I mean, bishops and all overseeing an inclusiveness conference to address issues at the local level that aren't resolved at the general level?
I suppose. But you'd asked about 2 other Methodist churches in Milwaukee that we had focused on. There was the Epworth Methodist Church, located at Garfield and 2nd Street. That area was 50% African American, but the church membership was entirely white. And they had no programs to reach out to residents in their own community. And then the Highland Methodist Church, in an area with similar demographics to Epworth. Its nearly all-white membership drove more than 5 miles each Sunday to attend services.
It's hard to see how that could continue.
Yeah. The good news was that we also knew of real efforts at Summerfield Methodist and First Methodist churches to deal with race relations. On any given Sunday, you would see a few worshipers from the immediate vicinity attending their services. However, other than Summerfield, the mostly white Methodist churches were endeavoring to maintain their membership by reaching out to the suburbs for members.
That's discouraging, I suppose.
Yeah, well, we did come up with a 9-point action plan to deal with race relations and inclusiveness in Milwaukee's Methodist churches.
That's something.
I suppose, and I was excited at the time. But in 1958, 2 years later, Bishop Northcott and Bishop Clare convened a follow-up conference with many of the same participants returning. And when we compared the action plan with what had been accomplished, we had to admit that little effective action had taken place. In fact, the racial problems in Milwaukee just seemed to be getting worse.
Very discouraging. So what was the point of more meetings and reports if there were no results? Especially for someone as busy as you with 4 young children at home.
Well, Charlie, that's where you'd be wrong. I had a busy life, of course, and true, meetings sometimes feel like you're just spinning wheels. I felt God had called me to. And my call was to help these new immigrants arriving in my city. In the past, Milwaukee had settlement houses that provided much-needed services to immigrant communities. The issues of poverty, crime, housing, infant mortality, juvenile delinquency were addressed, and immigrants were better able to integrate into the wider community. Now was the time for similar efforts to be extended for those arriving from the American South.
Okay, faith in action. I like it. So what was your next step? Hopefully not another meeting.
Well, yes, Charlie, another meeting. it with you and meetings? How can we humans here on Earth work together to accomplish God's good work without meetings? And by the way, what is a worship service but a meeting with God?
Okay, I see your point. Let's continue with your meetings and see where it leads us.
Thank you. Now, just a year after the 1958 Inclusiveness Conference met, the Executive Committee of the Wisconsin Conference, WSCS, met to address the overall mission needs of the Wisconsin Conference, looking forward to the next millennium.
That sounds important. When was this?
Let's see, it was Sunday, July 12th, 1959, a little after 5 p.m. at Warren Hall, Wayland Academy, Beaver Dam.
All right, sounds like another place we should visit. Let me just find my little heart thingy here and dial it in. Okay, and off we go.
Oh my goodness, Charlie, where in heaven's name did you take us? This doesn't look right at all. Look at the size of that church and the cold, pelting rain. What a nasty storm. This is definitely not July, Charlie, nor is it Beaver Dam.
Sorry about that. I only use this heart thingy that often. Oh, wonder bust. I must have dialed something in wrong.
Well, I can just make out the name of the church through the rain, and oh, what's that? There's a handful of women waiting to get in. Oh my, they're getting drenched. It looks like the church name is Tremont Street Methodist Episcopal Church. Now that doesn't make any sense. That's not Wisconsin.
I see the mistake I made, Will. Sometimes, never mind. I'm only off by 90 years and 1,100 miles. Considering the size and temporal space of God's universe, that's hardly anything.
Mr. Odd.
Okay, sorry, Will, but really, how serendipitous is this? Can't you see? We've been taken to March 1869, Boston, Massachusetts. And those women, those very women, are about to organize the Women's Foreign Missionary Society of the Methodist Episcopal Church. A week before, they had sent out invitations to women in 30 churches across Boston. But because of the storm, only 6 showed up. They could have canceled the whole thing, but undeterred, they went forward. And Wilma, now, you'll love this. You can draw a straight line from those very women and their love for mission to your call to mission. And all the other women of the WSCS.
Well, I am humbled. Yes, those were remarkable women who, against great odds, accomplished so much Christian mission. But as inspirational as this little tableau is, I'm getting wet, Charlie, and this is not helping recreate my fire.
Right. Okay, let's move on. Okay, let me just rejigger this one knob, and here we go. How's this better?
Well, this is more like it. A pleasant sunny summer day. Oh, there's Lou Ella Betcher, that is. She was the president of the Wisconsin Conference, WSCS, you know. Oh, she's a wonderful person. So kind and so supportive of my efforts in Milwaukee.
Really, Lou, you said. Okay, let me look at my notes from the archives. I don't seem to have any records for a Luella Betcher.
What? Charlie, she had one of the most caring, God-centered spirits I ever met. She was deeply involved and committed to social action and reconciliation. She attended the Paris Peace Conference, marched with Father Brocky. What? She was instrumental in developing the Methodist Manor in Milwaukee, for pity's sake. How in heaven's name could you lose her files, too?
I was joking. Of course we have her file. Pretty impressive, my dad.
Really, Charlie. You're just too much. Now, please don't do that again. I don't see any humor in making light of women's accomplishments.
Again, my apologies. Just trying to... never mind. Let's get back to the task at hand. Tell me what's going on here in Beaver Dam on this wonderful summer.
What's going on is that the women of the Wisconsin Conference, WSCS, were setting their mission priorities for the upcoming quadrennium. As I said, it began in 1960. They're listening to a report from a study committee, which I was a member of, where we listed which missions should be considered by our group.
And what was decided?
Well, we lifted up the need to provide educational opportunities for the children of the Spanish-American migrant families here in Wisconsin who are harvesting our crops. Also, we considered how to help the anticipated 2,000 airmen and their families to be based on the proposed Bung Air Force Base near Kenosha. We plan to continue our ongoing support for the Oneida Tribe, for Methodist Manor, Grant Hall, and, of course, There was the project that was closest to my heart.
Oh, what was that?
Well, the tremendous need for a day nursery, or what I like to call a Bethlehem Center, in the St. James area of Milwaukee. As part of the study committee, I wrote a pretty extensive report detailing the need and the challenges involved in creating such a center. The truth is, to make my case, I used a lot of statistics along with the history of the difficulties faced by African American immigrants to Milwaukee, all of which were presented at the Inclusiveness Conference I told you about before. Meetings are not without their merit, Charlie.
Whatever. Anyway, how was your mission proposal received?
Well, the WSCS Executive Committee agreed to create a St. James Area Study Committee. I was to be the president, and we were asked to investigate the feasibility of establishing a daycare center, along with adult classes in the fundamentals of education and vocation for mothers, perhaps a literacy center as well.
Sounds like quite the project you were considering. Did you have any idea what you were getting into?
Not really. But I felt called, and I trusted God would not call me if it was something I couldn't do. And remember, I was not planning on doing this by myself. Along with the support from other WSCS members and the pastor of St. James Church, I reached out to other community leaders in the field of welfare.
So off you went on this journey. For meetings, I suppose.
Yes, more meetings, Charlie. Lots of them. The truth is that this journey was more of a step-by-step process with a few delays and detours on the way, but, and I know this will irritate you to no end, the next step along the way was my attending yet another conference, a much bigger national Methodist conference on race relations. Our Wisconsin WSCS sponsored my attendance at the church-wide conference on human rights, to be held in late August 1959 at Southern Methodist University, Dallas, Texas.
Don't tell me. Is this where we're going next?
I would think so. And please, Charlie, be careful how you dial it in this time.
I'll do my best. Let's see, I just need to move this little widget.
Oh, wait, you know what? Seeing how that heart thing can take us any place, at any time in history, would it be possible to take a short detour?
Depends, there are rules, you know. Is this related to recreating your file?
Indirectly, it's certainly part of the story of the WSCS and missions in Wisconsin.
Good enough for me. What do you think?
Well, we already visited accidentally the women responsible for the organization of the Women's Foreign Missionary Society on the national level. How about me? I was always interested in the women who organized the first branch of that society in Wisconsin. They were all such pioneers.
Okay, anyone in particular?
How about Susan Steele? She was the first president of the WFMS in Wisconsin, which was organized just months after that rainy day in Boston.
Okay, sounds good. Let me look at her file if there's something interesting. She did a lot of speaking, organizing, even exhorting at Bible meetings in the 1860s. Now, that's interesting.
That's right. She was actually a licensed local preacher for a few years, until the General Conference put an end to women doing that sort of thing. A pioneer, as I said.
Okay, well, there's not a lot to choose from. How about, that's no good. Here we go. If you like pioneers, you'll like this one. Just let me dial it in.
Oh my, this is a wonderful old church, and it's filled with men.
Yes, that it is. You see, they're all Methodist clergy, so of course they're all men. It's the October 1871 gathering of the Wisconsin Annual Conference of the Methodist Episcopal Church. We're at the Summerfield Church in Milwaukee on a Saturday morning, the fourth day of the conference, and something quite extraordinary is about to occur.
I can't quite make out what the speakers are talking about.
Oh, they're all wondering how to respond to the horrible fires early this month. Peshtigo fire that took so much life up in the northern Wisconsin, and the Great Chicago fire that destroyed the block of buildings bequeathed by Eliza Garrett to start and fund that biblical institute in Evans. But I digress. It's not all I want you to notice. Oh, watch the back doors.
Am I looking? Oh. Is that?
That's Susan Steele entering the sanctuary.
And who is she walking toward?
That's her husband, Dr. George Steele, the president of Lawrence College, and a newly elected delegate to General Conference from the Wisconsin Conference.
He's nodding and motioning her to the platform.
Take note, this moment, this very moment, is the first time a woman was inside the bar at a Methodist conference in Wisconsin. And not only that, she's actually going to speak to the room, if you can imagine such a thing. She's going to give the second annual report of the Women's Foreign Missionary Society to the conference. You can't imagine the arm twisting it took to make this happen.
Yes, I can. And I sense some agitation. There's definitely grumbling in the room. What's that man next to Dr. Steele whispering in his ear?
Oh, he's expressing the sentiment of many of the clergy here. He's saying, this is what we are coming to, the women taking our work. But you know how Susan's husband replied, bless him. He said, and it is what we should be proud to see. I guess that sure put that old curmudgeon in his place.
For him. How did her speech go?
Oh, Susan's a talented speaker. And as a local newspaper reported, quote, the utmost attention was given her and excellent impression was made upon the people present.
A brave woman, stepping out of her place, not a troublemaker, but one willing to trouble the waters to bring about much needed change. She was willing to raise her voice to speak for those whom Jesus called the least of these. That right there, Charlie, that's my inspiration. Okay, I'm ready to travel with that.
All right, then off we go. Oh, dear.
Why is it so hot? I mean, really hot.
It's Dallas in August, Charlie. This is the first day of the conference, and it is an unbelievable 104 degrees.
How did a Wisconsinite like you survive?
Luckily, Southern Methodist University was in the vanguard of air-conditioned buildings. In fact, the first air-conditioned building in the entire Dallas area was their library, built in 1940. But let me tell you, Charlie, before I arrived in Dallas, I had to endure 3 days in a car that was not air-conditioned. And it was a lot more than the summer temperature that got me hot under the collar.
Excuse me.
Well, as it happened, I drove down with Reverend Dale Strong, who was white, and Clarence Bolton, a black man from Beloit. And on the second night, we couldn't find a motel that would accept us, unless Clarence drove the car and carried our suitcases pretending to be our servant. I was furious. And Charlie, it got worse. We could find nowhere to eat with Clarence. We simply would not be served. Even at roadside stands, we'd have to drive around back so that Dale could go around front to buy the food that we would then eat in the car. These vicious, demeaning practices really did something to me. You don't even want to get me started.
Okay, but you did eventually get here to Dallas, right?
Yeah.